Welcome back, dear listeners, to the Friday Flight Podcast, where we rank, recap, and review any horror movie in a given franchise. I'm Jumpscare Jer, the fright of the podcast, and I like horror movies.
I'm Frankie. I'm the flight of the podcast. I'm scared of horror movies. And today, Geraldine, we're covering Texas Chainsaw 3D.
3D. Which I'll be honest, I didn't watch this in 3D. I'm regretting it because I imagine...
Really?
Yeah, because, I don't have a 3D TV.
Who does?
Who does?
Well,
rich people, of course.
It's interesting. I think for a while, there was these movies coming out with the 3D in the title. But
I had a Coraline version on the DVD that came out 3D, and it came with little glasses, too.
See, did that work well? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was really cool.
That is cool. But it's just weird to me because I feel like most of the time these movies are meant to be enjoyed in 3D, but at the theater.
Yeah.
But when you make it for 3D, it's like you only have like a month or 2 months where people can come and experience it that way.
What I imagined, though, that it was really cool in 3D because watching this here, I was like, oh, I can see where this part would have been really cool in the theater.
Are you typically a fan of 3D films?
I love them. I think they're fun. However, I have to wear contacts, or I have to typically wear the 3D glasses over my glasses.
That's my problem. I don't have contacts. So I do that double glasses thing, and it's
a
annoying.
Lot. And also it kind of like sparks headaches.
Yeah, I always get headaches. Love
that.
It's sometimes it's bearable. I watched the newest Avatar movie in 3D and I enjoyed it. But yeah, this movie was directed by John Lucenhop and written by Adam Marcus, Deborah Sullivan, and Kirsten Elms. This movie did pretty well at the box office. It was on a budget of $20 million and ended up accruing, I think, about 43 at the box office. So it's doubled its budget. So it did fairly well. So people did come out for the 3D.
It came out in 2013, so I was probably about 15 when this was maybe, I don't know, maybe 14, 15, depending on the time of the year, because my birthday's late in the year, so never know. When I watched it, because I have not seen, this was my first watch through.
Right.
I went in with some expectations, and it was negative expectations, because my family was like, it was stupid.
Oh, okay. So your family already had opinions that they let you know about?
Yeah.
Okay.
But what did you think overall?
Overall, generally, guys, this is a higher tier film across the rankings of the Texas Chainsaw. It's definitely in the top half as opposed to the bottom half.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
And I had a decent time. I think the approach was so interesting. This is technically like the second round of a remake, because the 2003 that came out a whole decade before this. The 2003 remake had its approach and had its own prequel. This time we're doing a dedicated sequel to the original film, ignoring all the other films that came in between it. And I thought that was definitely at least a unique approach, like something interesting to do with the film instead of like recreating it entirely, like doing, because everybody loves the original. That's the one that everybody likes. So I definitely thought it was a really interesting decision. And overall, I like I said, I enjoyed the movie, and it was in the top half, I think, of the movies we've seen so far.
I agree. There were still, I have like a bulleted list of I was like things I liked and things I didn't like, because there were definitely things that I think they did well. Yeah. And things that like added a different depth to the universe of Texas Chainsaw, but there were some things that I was like, oh, come on.
Right. Okay.
But it wasn't, I guess my complaints were a lot smaller than I thought compared to my things I liked list. So overall, I had a pretty decent time with it.
Awesome.
And I thought obviously the gore was fun. Mm-hmm. I thought the pacing, I still had anxiety about it. I was like, oh God.
Yeah, there were definitely some tense scenes across the film. Yeah.
And so, it felt fun. I had fun with it. Is it the best one?
No, not by any means. But yeah, let's get down to it.
Okay.
So, we got another movie. We have our group of teens. I feel like this movie really focused a little more on Leatherface than the other ones did.
I think so too.
Previously, we've had like Leatherface as well as other antagonists, and often with one other's particular one, like in TNG, we had Matthew McConaughey's character as the other antagonist. In the other remakes, we had Officer Hoyt as the other antagonist, and this one we really just primarily have Leatherface.
And he's not really the antagonist.
That is so fascinating. Now, we're going to get into a long discussion about that towards the end of the movie, but here at the beginning of the movie, we see that it sets up that everything that takes place at the first scenes of this movie is immediately after the ending of the first film in 1974.
Yeah. So that kind of, the only thing that I had about that was like there was no like time mark.
Like, see, this is problematic.
That is problematic because that movie took place in the 70s.
Yes.
And then it almost seems like very modern. Like,
modern day.
I mean, it could very well be interpreted as like 90s.
I don't think it can.
Or like early 2000s.
In the middle of the movie when the officer was going throughout the house.
That's true. But they had like iPhones and shit. So I was like, this has to be like more modern.
I don't know if you noticed, Geraldine, but there's a scene with a tombstone in it.
Yeah.
Where it says the time of death of the grandma that our protagonist Heather has passed away, and
I did not pay attention.
The beginning of the beginning date, what made sense, but the second date was obscured by a branch, so they themselves recognize that there's a problem here because Heather, who's a baby at the very first scene of the movie, looks like she's about like 20 years old or in her 20s.
Yeah.
During the film. So that would mean this movie is at max 30 years later. I mean, so that would mean this movie would have to take place in like the late 90s.
Right.
Which doesn't line up with the technology.
It doesn't line up with the technology, nor the clothing, nor the environment. Like there's just some plot holes there, which is fine. But I mean, obviously that's kind of, it's a gripe. It's a big gripe to have as a storyteller and as a cohesive, narrative that you want to build, especially one that was as heavy as this one.
Yes. I think this one was very interesting in that like we left off at the beginning of at the end of the first film in 1974, and we had like only 3 characters, but in this movie when it starts off,
there's a whole fucking
so
family branch.
Bigger.
Yeah. It was another gripe because I was like, where did all these people come from? And I understand that they had some of these people come in to kind of like, I guess reinstate that it was like a big family matter and stuff.
Right.
But I mean, we also got a fun thing that happened. We got some cameos.
Oh, really?
Bill Moseley. He played Drayton Sawyer, or Jed's dad, who is Leatherface. He played Jed's dad, and he played Top in Leatherface 2.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that is cool.
And then Gunnar Hansen also made an appearance. But I don't know I think he may have been part of the family as well in the beginning.
Cool.
I'm not 1,000% sure. Don't quote me on that because I don't want to go down for saying something wrong.
Yeah, well, I always like it when that kind of thing happens and people get to come back and pay homage to the original, all that. But yeah, they didn't have to do that. I feel like they didn't really have to expand the family besides that one extra member.
It was literally not needed.
No.
But also really with that story, it doesn't line up either, because that's kind of like no, because in the original Texas, they still had like a town thing. So I mean, it's not like unheard of that there would still be like because my brain is so set on the newer ones that that town was going away, which is why.
Well, comparing the remakes, like we have a new name here. We're doing it's the Sawyer family.
Yeah.
It's not the
Thomas Hewitt
family, and it's not Thomas. It's
Jedediah.
Yeah. So, did you have a preference of the naming conventions?
I mean, these feel more like country names, so it makes more sense to me. But because Hewitt also sounds like a country kind of like southern name too. But Thomas just doesn't sound like it would be like.
Do you like Jedediah?
Yeah, I think it makes more sense.
Fair enough.
And like Drayton, like names like that just make more sense to me. Loretta, Verna, like those are names that I think of with like, I don't know, Deep South, and we're literally in Texas. So
well, along with with this new big family, we are introduced to an Officer Hooper, which I can only assume is like a reference to Toby Hooper.
Bert Hooper. No wait, was it Hooper? No wait, not Bert Hooper. That's Marvin Hooper. I'm thinking of Bert Hartman, the guy who plays the like very skewed mayor. Yes,
that's exactly right. And here we see them. We see them younger. We got an officer who showed us up to the scene, to the Sawyer household, but he's interrupted by a group of gentlemen who end up burning down this building, shooting and burning down this entire building. Now, I thought of you during this scene.
Why?
Because I was like, oh, well, this is Geraldine's perspective. Like, I feel like you oftentimes when you watch horror movies, you're like, oh, just kill them. Like, they deserve to die. Or
No. People who deserve to die. There's a difference.
But you don't think the people that did those things in the first 1974 movie, wouldn't you say that they deserve to die? Because
I mean,
supposedly this is that family.
If we are going by,
because it's a family of murderers,
right? If we're okay, it's a very nuanced thing. I would not be a mob person. I would not go with the mob. I think that Jedediah needs help. I think he needs like mental help.
What about the rest of the family?
Clearly they do too, but
okay. So at the beginning scene you're more with Officer Hooper in that they deserve due justice as opposed to like just burn it all down.
Yeah, I mean everyone deserves justice and like an equality, right?
I agree with you.
I mean, and that's another like an added depth to this story, like this layer that they've created with, like they're being like a family and they're like, well, I don't want to, but they were, and this is the point from the very beginning though, is that they were willing to comply and they were trying to comply, and then all of a sudden, people like these random degenerates show up and just start like, like I don't know.
Well, in their eyes, they're the good guys because they're
the heroes.
Yeah, because like I said, this is murderers. They just killed 5 teenagers.
Which I understand, like, yeah, that's horrible. That's really terrible. Mm-hmm. And I it's such a nuanced problem. Do you see?
Right.
Because it's like, on one hand, I understand being outraged because you don't want stuff like that happening in your town. Like, of course, whenever you hear about crime in general, like, I mean, my brain is like, whoa, crime.
Not good.
Not good.
Not lit.
Like,
does not vibe.
Yeah. No.
Right.
But especially like if it involves like somebody being killed, like especially if it's like. But I mean, I guess it also depends on the crime and who did it and like what they've gone through. But we can't consider that for every single person all the time. Otherwise, nobody would ever go to jail, I guess.
Well, I'm with Officer Hooper here and that they deserve due justice or whatever, but these mob obviously disagrees. The officer kind of can't do anything about it. They burn down the house. Everybody's presumed dead, except for a couple of people. One of them, which is Jedediah, apparently gets to escape from downstairs and doesn't face this burning death as well as mother and her child.
That, and apparently the grandmother like lives through this as well because she lives past.
I assume that she just wasn't there.
You think so?
Yeah, she was just elsewhere. The movie does not explain this.
Because I was like, that's a big inconsistency if she was there. It just doesn't make sense. The inconsistencies with the grandmother and...
I don't think the movie wants you to think about it too hard. I think they just want you to accept...
I just like a clear and concise story,
I just don't pay that much attention, if I'm being honest. I just assume maybe she was out grocery shopping.
It reminds me of like the movie Elf, like Walter Hobbs. He works at a publishing company he's making books, and he gets in trouble for shipping a book, and there's missing pages, and he's like, these kids are not gonna like wonder what happened to this puppy and its freaking pigeon.
I agree.
He's like, just send it out.
Yeah.
And then his boss comes in and he's like, my niece would like to know what happens to a certain puppy and a certain pigeon. And he was like, even if those pages were still in the book, it would have sucked. And I'm like, I like the story to kind of like do full circle kind of thing.
That makes sense. I do think those expectations need to be tempered with this movie.
Yes,
I don't think this movie sets out to accomplish all that and be, like you said, self-referential or anything.
Right.
This mother and the baby who end up surviving is found by one of the people in the mob that burned down the house. He kicks her face in and takes the baby away for himself.
Yeah, he sure does. And I was like, at first I was like, oh no, they're all dead. Everyone's dead. Of course, not Leatherface because he's down in the basement. But I was like, oh my God, rip, like R.I.P. the baby. And then I was like, hello, J.K., the baby's alive. R.I.P. the mother. Yeah. She got kicked in the face. She got kicked in the face.
That's enough to do her in. This baby ends up being our protagonist.
Yeah. She and the mom experience burns, and the mom, I guess, the whole family, the women at least, wear necklaces with an S because they're the Sawyer family. Mm-hmm. So they have like this S necklace, and I guess that necklace got so hot that it burned the baby.
Left a birthmark kind of thing.
Left a little bit of a branding. And then we find out later like why that is and what it was and stuff. It does become important. Cool thing. I liked that they, still like had those little things that they paid attention to. But
and this girl's name is Heather.
Yeah.
She is played by who?
She's played by Alexandra Daddario.
I'm not familiar with her.
She's been in a lot of things. She was in the one. Okay, she was in the Percy Jackson movie that everyone hated. I liked it personally because I've never read the fucking books, so I don't have that expectation. Right. She was in that movie, loved it, and then she was also in The White Lotus season 1. Very good show. If you like drama, it's got it.
Okay,
it's got it. But she's a fantastic actress. She's been in several things. I can't remember all of them, but
the only things I have to say about her, I think everybody's performance is fine enough, and I think her as the lead, one, she definitely does a lot of crunches. Her abdomen is
so flat.
She is concernedly skinny. But I did notice in a few scenes she has like abs.
Yeah, she has like one of the best bods. Also, she's so pale. It's so pretty. She's got these piercing blue eyes. I've always been like, wow, she's a very gorgeous woman.
Okay.
She's also known for having her big boobs. I know that's the thing, but
I didn't notice that at all.
They also, I mean, they have part of it in the male gaze part of the movie because we have to talk about that later, of course. Out of nowhere, her shirt is like open, and I'm like, oh, of course.
So I want to have, we've talked about it a few times throughout these movies. I'm sure there are a lot of fans out there who like it's one and the same, and they kind of expect that. But is it an eye-rolling moment for you in these films for characters to be sexualized generally?
It is an eye-rolling thing. Sometimes it's funny, like for example, in different franchises, sometimes like characters going to get it on, you're like, oh no, they about to die, and then you get a cool kill scene. So sometimes it's like worth it, because I mean, as far as the visuals and horror movies,
because I know a lot of people that come see movies, they want to see hot people do hot people things, like be it a romance or in this situation a horror film.
I don't watch it for that. I watch. Okay. I mean, I typically I don't know. I just go in for the story, especially for example, like. Growing up, I watched that Orphan movie, and they made a prequel later, like I think in the past year or two, called Orphan First Kill, and I recently just watched that today as well for the first time, and that was a really good story, and I had zero expectations going in because I was like, I'm gonna keep my mind open. I don't know what they're gonna do with the story, and it was a really cool story, and I was like, damn, they tied it all in together.
I'm hit or miss about it. I don't mind it. I do think it's like. In a lot of instances, I think of it as like, its own artistic addition. Like, don't get me wrong, it's definitely through a male's perspective, and there's no taking.
Well, hear me out. I don't mind a good sex scene in like a movie, TV show, anything like that, because like sometimes it's like. It's nice. I mean, I don't know. It's not nice to watch because it makes it sound pervy.
No, but that's just the case. Like, there's a reason like Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, Jennifer Lawrence, like a lot of these famous people are attractive people, and people like seeing hot people do things. You know what I mean?
Do hot people things, I guess. Yeah. I mean, like, for example, in the TV show You or like Bridgerton, like
exactly.
Sometimes those steamy
there's an appeal to it.
Yeah, there's an appeal to it. So it's like, oh, okay.
So oftentimes I do I find myself dismissing that in horror movies where I'm like, oh, they're just doing the hot people thing.
In the horror movies, it's just like you're about to die, so it's like a different kind of mindset.
Fair enough.
Like where do you have the time to think about this when you're about to die? But I guess that's also the situational irony where we know what they don't know, and that's like a different thing. But so I guess it just depends on the horror movie itself. But sometimes it's funny, and sometimes it's okay. Like I don't mind it. Right. I mean, and also, in every like brand there is, sex seems to sell.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's kind of how
so people
how
come
work.
out for it, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, we got Heather. Now the only thing I have to say about her, I thought her performance is perfectly fine. Is just that her style is like so mid 2000s to me
compared to everybody else. Like. I mean, I don't mind it because I mean, there's like a darkness to it, which I mean, she seems angsty anyway, I guess.
Yeah, she definitely seems like she listened to My Chemical Romance in the mid 2000s. Her hair part is like so far to the side, and like the top of her hair is so big. Her bangs are just like that's her entire face.
The problem that I have with the wardrobe here is that like what time are we in? Like, I don't know.
The movie doesn't want you to know. It wants to be blurry about that kind of thing.
Because they probably didn't do well enough thinking about the story there to be like, oh shit, this timeline ain't gonna work. So
they just wanted you to kind of not think about it. Which is
whatever. That's neither here nor there. But it's also like, damn, like it's just the wardrobe needed to be better. However, right. She's got a nice bod. They did show it off a little bit. I mean, whatever. I'm not here for that. I'm here for. I want Leatherface to kill people. Yeah. I'm like, yeah.
She's a beautiful woman. Not my type.
Yeah.
But, you know, I can appreciate she has a boyfriend named Ryan.
Okay. I got to talk about this pairing. Okay. First of all, it's Trey Songz, who is like a known singer in the R&B, like hip hop community.
Right.
He's a good singer. Really good singer. I was really flabbergasted to see him in this movie because I was like, I didn't know he acted. They even had his full name, like Tremaine Neverson, as like in the credits as well. And I was like, whoa. We're acting. Okay.
I thought his performance was just fine.
It was fine. Wasn't anything like extraordinary. Like he did fine. His character I thought was cool in the beginning, but then we find out he's just a piece of shit later. I don't know. They had no chemistry to me, though. They really had no chemistry.
If I'm being honest, I don't think Heather had a lot of chemistry with anyone. Because she kind of pairs off a couple of times, and none of the times that I think she mostly fits in an aesthetic more so than any kind of a relationship, chemistry kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean, well, unfortunately, I think that's also kind of part of the storyline is that her boyfriend cheats on her with her best friend. And we don't know that. It's like an irony thing.
Her friend Nikki.
Her friend Nikki, who is played by Tania Raymond.
Uh-huh. Now Nikki, I feel like she's the one that gets more like blatantly sexualized in the movie. Like I think Ryan and Nikki both get more sexualized than Heather does.
Yeah.
I think Heather obviously also does, but not as forward as the others.
Yeah, it was weird because it came out of nowhere too. Because like first they were like friendly. And she's like, oh, thanks for setting me up with this nice guy named Kenny, who I loved Kenny, by the way, and I was very upset by his death.
You know, Kenny is one of the only characters we've got in any of these Texas Chainsaw movies that was like genuinely just like a chill guy.
Genuinely chill. He was making steak dinners for people. And then I was literally thinking about this in the movie. I was like, oh my God, the house is going to burn down because nobody's there to watch the steak. Like, what's going to happen to the food?
Yeah, he was offering to make food. He was driving. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, he offered to drive. Like, yeah. What a stand-up guy, and we barely knew him.
I do gotta say though, like Ryan obviously, you know, cheats on his girlfriend. Yeah. Nikki's worse.
Yes.
Because Ryan is trying to like be like, no, please, like that was in the past. You know, I'm with Heather.
I was really, really drunk, and she's like, something fucked up happened, and then she's like, oh yeah, I told you, and like is trying to taunt him.
Yeah, she keeps trying to seduce him.
Also, like gropes him in the store, and I'm like, there are people around.
I think that's what she likes about it. I think, you know, she's a very sexual being and like...
Which is fine. Love that for her.
Yeah,
but
for
also,
sure. But
not your best friend's boyfriend.
Come on. There's some boundaries, you know?
Yeah. And I was like, not the best friend. Because like, obviously, like he's trying to set her up with like a friend. And so like, I was like, oh, that's so sweet. Like they're like close. Too. But then I also noticed, like, eventually throughout the movie, she started getting more and more flirty with Ryan. And I was like, I don't like where this is headed.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. When they were about to play pool, she's like, you're my bitch. And I was like, whoa. Yeah. This is really aggressive.
Well, our story kicks off between these four when Heather gets a letter.
Yeah.
From a relative that she didn't know about.
You want to know something that was really funny, though?
Okay.
We start off, like, which, by the way, the title sequence, very cool. Meant to be in 3D. I thought it was nice because it like cuts like the word chainsaw in half, and then we get like a cool like transition into a scene of like cutting meat like at a like deli kind of situation in a grocery store, which is where Heather works. A fun parallel because we find out she's related to Jed, so that I thought that was a nice. Yeah. I was like, wow.
I didn't think about that, but yeah, because Jed is typically portrayed as like a butcher, Leatherfaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had to throw that little tidbit in because I was like, oh, look at them.
I didn't think about that. That's a good catch. But yeah, she gets a letter. Yeah. And she has to go visit this estate, visit these people that she didn't know she was related to. And when she confronts her parents about him, they're like, oh, they're really dismissive. They tell her that she doesn't want anything to do with those people. Yeah. But she didn't like her upbringing. So she really wants to seek this out. And when she tells her boyfriend, Ryan, he tells her that they're all going to go.
Which I liked that. It was very nice of them.
Very supportive.
Like, yeah, they were like, we know, like, also, I'm a little disappointed because we find out it's like Halloween weekend in the movie. We didn't get anything Halloween related other than I saw one pumpkin in like the grocery store section.
Right. I do think the get together towards the end of the film at the carnival.
Yeah,
I think that was like a Halloween carnival.
Yeah,
affair.
that felt fun. By the way, if somebody ever wants to throw a Halloween carnival, fucking cool. I'm down for that.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
But like, they didn't do anything else with this. Why throw that in there? I mean, my brain is like, Halloween, love it, spooky.
Yeah, they should have worked with that.
They should have worked with it, and they didn't.
Yeah.
So I was just a little disappointed because at least, you know, like in Scream 6, they throw that it's Halloween like
Which
in
is super
there.
cool. I enjoy
super
that.
cool. I loved it, and we get to see costumes all over the movie.
This we don't get that.
We don't get that at all.
No.
Maybe down in deep Texas they don't celebrate that Halloween because it's that devil's holiday.
Maybe you might be right. You might be onto something.
Someone used to say that growing up to me. They were like, because I loved Halloween so much, they were like, you worship the devil, and I was like, whoa, what? Where?
It doesn't even have to go as far as Halloween. I know a lot of places don't appreciate like Harry Potter. They ban those kind of books because, you know, there's like wizardry in it, you know. Anyway, our group of heroes end up going together in a van, like we often see, you know, vans in these movies, and we see hitchhikers in these movies.
Oh my gosh, we have to talk about him because there were some of these things that just didn't happen naturally. It just felt so forced, I guess.
No, yeah, you're right.
But we did get a gas station, but it wasn't a creepy one. We get like a typical road trip thing, and they come out with bags full of cheap snacks.
Yeah.
I loved it because I'm like, yes, it feels like a good road trip.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
another thing that makes it feel modern.
Yeah, another thing that makes it feel way too modern. Like,
yeah, oddly enough, and when they're pulling away, that it's really odd how like they kind of hit Daryl. It seems a lot more like Daryl like jumped out in front of them or something.
I literally thought this was gonna be like he's in on it. He knows the family.
For a while, me too. Yeah.
I was like, got my eye on him.
But he is, you know, like a pretty upstanding guy, at least at first when we meet him. In return for like accidentally hitting him, they agree to give him a drive.
Yeah.
Give him a ride to his destination. He, I think, is also kind of sexualized. You know, his shirt, I feel like it's barely buttoned at all. And he's kind of, you know, a meaty guy.
Yeah.
He gets into the van and they start, you know, heading over to this big house.
In Newt, Texas.
In Newt, Texas. That's
you know
right.
what's funny? I thought the mom was like calling Heather Newt as like an endearing term because I watch movies with subtitles on. I do that because I'm like I can't hear. I like to make sure that I can hear everything that's going on because I feel like I miss important things or like I mishear them. So that's funny because I was like, which the family that she grew up with sucked. Obviously, the mom goes outside and pleads with her, and she's like, Newt, you don't want to go there. And so I was like, I thought that she called her Newt. But
I've never heard of Newt as a term of endearment.
I mean, I haven't either, but I was like, interesting. But I guess it wasn't. She was just saying like, it was like a weirdly phrased sentence. Like, you don't want to go there. It's like Newt.
Newt, comma.
And I was like, oh.
When she arrives there's a lawyer to tell her, you know, like, this is your inheritance.
I've seen him in so many movies, but I can't remember his name.
I'm not super familiar with him, but he does. There's something there. I think that I might.
He reminds me of the Monopoly Man, but in a good way.
You know, I'm not a big fan of Monopoly, Geraldine.
I love Monopoly. It's fun.
Do you really?
It's a fun game.
Have you ever finished one game?
No, but I always wanted to be the banker.
Why?
I don't know.
You like having the money?
Yeah, it's not my money though. I'm giving it out.
Yeah. Well, this lawyer gives her basically just tell her, read this letter. He gives her a letter, Heather, and he's like, make sure you read this, by the way. And then throughout the rest of the movie, she decides not to read it.
What a dumb thing to do.
Until the end.
If somebody's like, you got to read this letter to understand everything that's going on, I would have too much anxiety. I'd be like, I'm reading it right now in front of you.
Me too, yeah.
Like, that's just how my brain operates. If someone's like, oh, I've written you a letter, I'm like, or like,
read it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, she doesn't read it. They go into the house. They're surprised. Like, wow, this is a big house. It's a mansion.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. Kenny's going to cook. Let's go grab some groceries.
Looks like they rebuilt the house, essentially.
Yes, this is definitely a different house.
It definitely is a different house. There's also a gate with a code.
Yeah, a big gate. I mean, it's a mansion. Like,
yeah, it's really nice. Like,
yeah.
I would live there.
There's a little bit of graffiti. People apparently don't like the people that live here in New Texas.
Yeah, they don't like Verna. They called her a bitch.
That's right.
And red spray paint.
They decide they're going to go into town to get some stuff. Daryl stays behind. I don't know why.
I did not understand this scene either. I would be like, let's go, all of us. Like,
no, but they kind of like told Daryl, and then while they were leaving, they were like, "Oh man, Daryl's such a good guy," you know, like unpacking all our stuff, getting the house ready. And you just met this guy.
As soon as they drive away, he's like, and like
wipes everything,
like scooping everything up, candelabras, silverware, anything he could find. And I was like, "You mother piece of shit!" I kind of
don't blame him. They literally handed him over the keys, and I'm like, "You badge of character."
Yeah.
You just met this guy. You're gonna leave him here
exactly.
at this house.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, back in the town, we meet the mayor, who is the same guy who led the mob to burn down the Sawyer house.
I was like, "Oh, I am not shocked in the slightest."
No, this feels like the way things usually go down.
This feels like every politician, anyway.
Yeah, this is the kind of people that end up gaining power somehow.
Absolutely, and we meet one of the little cops. He's not the sheriff, but we meet one of the cops. His name's Carl.
Right.
And he's like a pretty boy. He seems really nice, caring, but it still feels like all of these weird Texans in this movie are like sexualizing all of the girls that are like, I don't know, what did the guy say?
He tried to be a little flirty with her. Like, he was kind of mansplaining charcoal to her for a bit.
You don't want this one.
Yeah.
I'm like, chill, dude.
Yeah, me too. I think that works on some people, maybe, especially maybe 30 or 40 years ago, or at least people were like let that kind of thing slide. But in today's standards, you're kind of a little pushy fella. Carl was portrayed by Scott Eastwood.
Yeah.
Son of famed director Clint Eastwood.
He looks a lot like his dad, actually.
He does. He really does.
Young Clint Eastwood was also beautiful.
And yeah, so we meet these guys. By the time they go back to the house, they've discovered that everything's like, oh man, Daryl took all our stuff. And he ran, he's gone, he's not even here. Little do they know that when he went into what appears to be like a wine cellar, he found this, door that led somewhere. And while he was exploring, he got bonked in the head by one Leatherface.
With a meat? No, was it a meat cleaver?
I don't remember.
Or a meat tenderizer, but bonked like several times in the head.
And I feel like that was kind of an homage to the first movie, how like Leatherface would do that, just bonk you on the head, knock you out.
Oh man, he got it bad because like his face was beat in. I was like, bye, Daryl. Right. And I was like, serves you right. And I'm just kidding.
So then the teens have some time in the house. This is where we get that pool scene that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, they just start. They're like, oh, don't be all sad that they stole everything. Like, it's okay.
We can have a good time. Yeah. Something that took me out about this scene is Ryan, who is portrayed by Trey Songz, is playing pool, and they're listening to a Trey Songz song.
They have his songs sprinkled throughout the movie.
I think it's odd that I don't know why.
It is odd because they don't fit because they're very like R&B and hip hoppy, which I mean, I guess I get it if that's like, because typically that age, like you listen to kind of like house party kind of music, so kind of was kind of house party-ish, but it was also still.
Well, what took me out of it is just that he's the artist and he's in a scene with his own music.
Well, I'll tell you. Well, I mean, because like I shamefully watched The Idol with The Weeknd because I'm a fan of The Weeknd. I'm a fan of his music, his artistry, and his voice. So I watched the show, and like he was, I had heard through the grapevine that he was not going to have any singing parts in this movie or in the show.
Right.
But in every episode, he had songs that he did, and I was like, what? But like, I guess he meant his character wasn't the singer or anything. And I was like, oh, I guess that makes sense, but I was still confused.
Still odd,
because like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel you. Kenny's a good guy. He's trying to cook dinner for everybody, but he goes downstairs, meets the same fate as Daryl has, except when he's going upstairs, he gets kind of like clung by like a hook into the back, and he gets dragged back down. Nobody in the house hears this, I suppose. Yeah, because the music's too loud. Like Nikki's outside, like just flirtatiously looking at Ryan, like. Yeah.
And he's like just trying to play pool. He's like,
yeah,
just focus on the game.
Trying to keep it together.
It's like annoying. I'm like, just stop.
Yeah, and Nikki definitely, I mean, she's harassing him. Like,
yeah.
Like she.
But at the same time, like I said though, and I think that's a kind of a testament to like maybe why this happened is at the beginning of the movie we get like this like steamy scene between Heather and Ryan.
Yeah.
And it doesn't end up going forward.
Yeah.
And so maybe that leads me to believe that maybe like they're just in a rut in their relationship, or maybe like she goes through so much with her upbringing that we don't get to see or know about. It kind of leaves some of the interpretation up to the audience. Like,
That's right.
We don't really know what goes on in the relationship. We don't really know what her upbringing was like, but we get to see a glimpse of the parents, and they sucked.
Yeah,
Like,
awful parents.
They were awful. Like the dad's a drunk, and he's like, "I should have left you there," and I'm like, I would have smashed his little beer cans over his dumb head. Stupid man.
I agree with you.
And like making his wife feel bad about like not being able to produce children.
Yeah.
Like that's not like, even if like that is like theoretically like biologically like her fault, like she can't help that. She can't help that. You know what I mean?
No, but he
Like,
doesn't seem to care.
He doesn't seem to care because he's a stupid man and he's just drunk and he
Yeah.
hates his life. Well, not our fault, stupid man. I hate him.
Yeah, I
I
don't.
feel really bad for her. You know?
For all of them, if I'm being honest,
Yeah.
like you know, the mother is also, you know, crappy, but you know, when you're in a certain situation, it's kind of like everybody suffers.
Everybody suffers. You know, it also makes you wonder, like, I wonder, like, because we don't really know what, like, Jed's family was like. To me, it sounded like they were kind of okay in the beginning. But, I mean, if we're going by the story from 1974,
That's what I think it is.
they
yeah.
were killing people, so they're not okay. They're, you know, interesting people. And that house was, like, horrible condition, you know, would have been a terrible place to raise a baby. What do I know? But like, so I guess my brain is like, what would have her upbringing like been like then?
Right. It was probably doomed either way.
Yeah. No matter what, I think it was gonna be bad for her.
So Heather goes upstairs, finds this lifeless body. She you know, gives her a panic. You know, she finds
Dead Verna.
poor Verna. She's been dug up.
Yeah, and she is lifeless, and
Yes.
I
and
imagine she's stinky too.
probably. Now this causes Heather to freak out. She's yelling out, "Guys, guys, guys! You know this thing is happening," but she can't find anybody.
My brain is like, why wouldn't they have gone upstairs sooner? If they were,
Checking the house out.
yeah.
Because they didn't wanna. You know, because plot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I would have. And maybe
also
this
would
wouldn't
have.
have happened.
Like Scooby-Doo kind of shit. Like, let's check this place out.
This is a big place. I want to kind of know my environment, my surroundings.
Right.
She starts yelling out for help, but she can't find any because Nikki has, you know, excited Ryan out in a panic to check out something in the barn.
Yeah.
Because she's like freaking out, like, Ryan, like, please look, it's under there, it's under this bucket inside like this barn. And he opens it up and it's just 2 shot glasses and some party juice.
Party juice.
And he's like, what, come on, Nikki. And when he turns around, Nikki has undressed and she has some intentions, obviously. So while this is happening, Heather is inside.
Yeah.
Comes across Leatherface in the kitchen, chopping up some fingies into a bucket.
Casually chopping off some fingies.
And this is really when we get a first, like, really clear look at his face.
Yeah.
And now I want to talk to you about it. Like, what do you think about, like, the visual appearance of our Leatherface for this movie?
I think he looks fine. I don't have any gripes about it. I honestly, I think the red shirt is different. I didn't think it was different in a bad way though.
Do you feel like the performance in this movie, because this is the same Leatherface as Gunnar Hansen. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be the same character because it's a continuation of that film. Do you feel like he portrayed that properly?
There are some inconsistencies, but I think overall, like, because we still get kind of that, like, we get that scene where the family is like, they're like, you let somebody get away, and he was like kind of wailing a little bit. So we kind of get some of that. So I didn't dislike that. But overall, like, there's not much he doesn't like do much of that.
Yeah, I think he's just okay. I mean, I feel like some of the
it's
physical...
not overwhelmingly great. I still think in 2003 and the beginning, that guy did fantastic.
Yes. Now, I will say, I do think that's a different take on the character.
A different take on the character
as opposed
as well.
to the 1974's, and this one's trying to continue that original take. I do think the physical mannerisms are very similar. I think he runs just like Leatherface did in the first original film. So I appreciate that. I like the mask. Heather obviously is scared by him. Yeah. And starts running away. She trips over the front porch stairs.
Oh man, this girl's clumsy as hell. That'd
She
be me.
really is.
That would be me, truthfully.
You take her time, chill out, take it easy. She runs into the family grave.
Yeah, family cemetery. I
Family
was gonna
cemetery.
ask you, like, well, how would you feel about seeing a family cemetery?
Well, I have. One time at a museum in Nashville, there's a zoo that you can attend, and at the zoo they have a house that has been maintained for over 100 years, and in the house they have their own cemeteries, and one of which was really fascinating because it was a slave cemetery. So it's where the family buried all their slaves, and most of these graves had gone unmarked.
That's horrible.
And there's been this effort to find out who these people were and to give them proper tombstones. And yeah, I know. And so I have seen a similar situation where like a bunch of people have been buried near a house.
That's also
together.
a nice way to kind of repair some of the damage that.
Yeah, some reparation.
Yeah, some reparation for the history.
Yeah, so I thought it was really cool. And in this, Heather goes into this family cemetery. She decides to hide in a grave. Now, I disagree with this. I wouldn't do this myself. I feel like you're kind of digging yourself into a hole.
Literally.
And I think you can't go anywhere if he finds you from here.
Yeah. First of all, I don't want to be in a what's it called? A casket. I don't want to be in a casket yet.
Yeah, a little
actually,
early, Heather.
I don't want to be in a casket, period. Actually, I want to be cremated when I pass.
You'd like to be cremated?
Yeah, because I have chores for people. Like I think I've talked about that on this podcast before.
All
but
right.
I have chores for people. I'm going to pay for a trip and make people go places and relieve my ashes around the world.
Now, what if you didn't amount to any kind of money in your life?
Then I will have them go broke doing it for me.
Dang,
I'm just kidding.
wow.
I'm kidding.
Needy even in the afterlife.
Yes, 1,000%. I am 1,000% needy. But yeah, like, I don't know. Well, I guess it depends because in one of my favorite episodes of Goosebumps, it's called Welcome to Horrorland. They have like this casket, like floating ride, and like you're able to like lay in a casket and you're floating on like a body of water, and in the scene it closes on them and then it locks them in.
No.
And I was like,
I'm out, boss.
I was like, oh my God. But at the same time, I would totally go to Horrorland and totally do that, I think.
You're
I don't
crazy,
know.
man.
So I guess it depends on my feelings that
No,
day.
I'm claustrophobic. I can't do that. Have you ever seen? I've seen these
like-
chambers that you can enter, and they're supposed to be like they're kind of something sensory. It's filled with water, and it's supposed to make you feel.
Yes. I know what you're talking about. Deprivation tanks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I would never partake in such a thing. I would freak out.
I don't know that I would. I mean, I mean, I'm pretty open-minded. I feel like I'd give it a try.
Yeah.
But if I didn't like it, I'd be like, get me out immediately.
Yeah. I panic when I can't get my watch off. Like it's taking me a little too long. I start freaking out.
I do that with my contacts.
Oh.
If I can't get my contacts out, I'm like,
Start freaking out.
I'm like, oh my God, it's stuck to my eye.
Oh.
But it's not. Sometimes it's just I'm dumb and I can't get them out.
It was still panicking. Too
little
much.
bit.
Too much for me. I don't like feeling stuck. Like I have no, free will basically. And Heather kind of puts herself in a situation like this. However, it does give the 3D another opportunity because Leatherface finds her and starts chainsawing into the casket. And the chainsaw's coming right at you. We didn't watch it in 3D, but I still feel like you kind of get the effect. Like what
That's
they're
a
going.
big ass casket, first of all, or she is just like a very tiny human.
I'm sure like I said, she's concernedly skinny in this movie. Like she needs to eat, like if I'm being honest. But she is saved because Ryan and Nikki, who assumedly had just finished, having something with each other.
Having intercourse, essentially. It's implied because she runs out wearing I guess his flannel.
Yes, and he's not wearing a shirt.
He's not wearing a shirt. He's just wearing like sweatpants and his undies. And I'm like,
so I think they got it on. I'm not a detective, but
yeah, I mean, I may not be smart, but I'm not dumb. They definitely got it on.
And they're like, "Who's that guy?" There's all this smoke, and they start yelling like, "Hey, hey!" And then so he's like, "Oh," and then turns around and starts approaching them at the barn. You know, it's nighttime now. One thing I will say about Nikki is she don't play no games. Like
as soon as he goes away, yeah.
Yeah, he starts approaching.
Oh wait, Nikki. I was thinking Heather. Might be.
Sorry. As soon as Leatherface starts approaching them, Nikki is like, close the barn door, goes for a shotgun.
My brain is like, obviously it's written in the script, obviously, because my brain is like, when did they have time to know that was in there?
Oh, never.
Never.
No, she's just. But they are in Texas, and everybody has a gun in their car in Texas.
Right.
So maybe she just came up with the assumption. But she is very like she defends herself for sure.
Yeah.
But Leatherface does end up leaving when she tries shooting him with the shotgun, and in comes.
What does she say? Welcome to Texas, motherfucker. Is that what she says?
Yes, which doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make any sense because
they're already in Texas.
They're already in Texas.
Why would make you assume this is a person coming from a different state? It doesn't make sense. I do appreciate. I love the Texas of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like I do think like it's an interesting, creates like a specific kind of environment and aesthetic.
Yeah.
But that line made no sense.
Made no sense.
I don't think that's the worst line in the movie.
It's not.
We'll get it. There's a line that I personally love in the film that we'll get to later. I'm sure we're both thinking of the same thing.
Maybe, and it's probably something that I absolutely hated.
Oh, okay. I loved it personally, but we'll get there when we get there. Heather comes in bursting into the barn with the car that she's driving, tells everybody to get in.
Wild. And then I guess she moves over, lets Ryan drive. But also in my brain, I'd be concerned. Why the fuck are you guys out here?
Oh,
and I'm by myself.
Geraldine, I think if you're concerned with that in this moment, I think you have way too much. You're assuming you'd have the foresight for all this.
Yeah, I guess so.
In a moment of panic.
In a moment of panic.
Yeah, I don't think you'd be thinking about that at all. You're just like, let's GTFO, which they try to do. They start driving towards the gates. There's an brief argument about should we stop and let the gates open or should we just ram through?
They should have let the gate open.
They should have, but they decided to try to ram through. Don't work. And it kind of messes up the car. They try to back up, and eventually they finally do get through with Leatherface right on their tail. But Leatherface gets one of the tires, chainsaws it in half, and the car flips over into a ditch.
Yep.
Killing Ryan. Now,
Ryan.
Do you think Ryan, was this some sort of escape for him, not having to deal with the fate of Leatherface? Or do you think, it's
yeah, but I mean, he still has, in the afterlife, he still has to because his body is taken from the scene of the crime. That's
right, yeah.
So, he still is going to, but he won't feel it. So he won't have to be killed in that moment.
Not by Leatherface, at least.
Not, suffer, I guess.
We did miss a scene where Heather gets bonked when she initially sees Leatherface.
Yeah.
And then we get this whole, she's down in the basement, she gets knocked out, and Kenny's still alive.
Still alive. He gets hung on a hook, and then he tries to, go for the face.
Looks like it kind of just slaps him a little bit. Kind of gives him a little smack. This angers Leatherface.
He
chainsaws him.
Literally what you see a magician fake do.
Yeah.
Chopped off the whole bottom half of the body.
I thought that was just okay. I think that I think it was kind of like the obvious thing you do with a chainsaw.
Yeah.
For a scene, but I thought it was visually it didn't look that amazing. It was just fine. I thought the beginning, I think it was where they're upstairs and he's laying on the chainsaw and he picks it up and chainsaws him in half like that. I think that was a little more crazy.
I don't know. It was a little bit more grotesque, but that movie itself was just so. It did it much better, I guess.
I agree with you. It was scarier.
Sometimes, watching this movie, it just felt like a rushed job as well. Even though they seemingly did well, it just didn't. We don't get enough time to connect to the characters like we do in the beginning.
I agree.
We don't get enough time to really process anything that's happening. It just happens.
No, yeah, you're right. But
we literally meet the parents for like 2 seconds, and then that's it. That's all we get.
It kind of gives you the glimpse of it. So you have it surface level, like there is underlying stuff, but it doesn't really delve into it too much. It just gives you like an overlying theme.
Yeah.
But anyway, after this accident, Ryan is dead. Leatherface is kind of shaking the car a bit, trying to get at them. Gets Nikki across the stomach.
And on the leg at some point.
That's right. Heatherface escapes and grabs his attention.
Yeah, and I was like, oh no, R.I.P. Heather. Not Heather. R.I.P. Nikki, but she seemingly doesn't die because we find that out later.
Not quite yet. But Heather distracts Leatherface and he chases her into like a carnival, like we discussed earlier. Yeah. He is tunnel vision on her.
Tunnel vision.
I was thinking about this because he didn't kill anybody else at the carnival.
Yeah, I imagine he would have been like, rant, but...
Yeah, trying to take out as many people as he could. But no, he's set on Heather.
I literally had a theory in the beginning, and I was like, ooh, he's going to go after all of these people's kin when he gets out of this house. Mm-hmm. He did not.
Not quite everybody, but he does have like a scoreboard kind of thing in his room where he has the faces of the news article of the quote unquote heroes.
It makes me think of Billy Madison.
Not familiar.
Billy Madison's a really funny, of course, the funny Adam Sandler movie, and Steve Buscemi's character, like I guess he gets bullied growing up in school, and so he has like a list of people that he wants to kill.
Oh, that's
so
funny.
It's like a joke. And then Billy Madison calls him, and he's like, hey, man, I just wanted to say I'm really sorry for the way I treated you back in school. And so then he's like, oh, it's okay. And so then he takes lipstick and scratches his name off the list, and then he takes lipstick and just rubs it all over his lips.
That's funny.
Which is a fun little, I guess, nod to Silence of the Lambs and stuff. Funny. So it's really,
so be
really
nice
goofy.
to people.
Be nice to people.
Apologize to them. You never know.
You never know. They might have a scoreboard with your face on it. So
if you're still in school, you could be one of those. Don't come to school tomorrow, and you get that pass. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, Heather gets saved. Leatherface ends up doing another 3D move.
That was cool, and I was like, man, I'm kind of jealous I didn't see this in 3D because I bet it would have been cool.
You wanted to see that chainsaw get flung into your face in 3D.
Yeah, I would have been like, ee! I bet. It would have been cool.
He flings his chainsaw to get away from the cops, and the cops take in Heather.
Yeah.
And then we have this whole situation. Now everything's starting to unravel. We have Officer Hooper, we have the mayor, and we have Heather. Heather's left alone with a box of evidence where she uses to find out what happened to her family.
Would you do the same thing if you were in a room with an evidence box and they leave you alone in the room?
Kind of. I think in her situation, yeah. Just because I think I would have figured out how sketchy everything is, because the mayor gives me bad vibes from the offset.
Yeah.
So I think she.
He's like, let me take this house off your hands, and she's like, no.
Yeah, she's obviously suspicious of him, and I think it's because of this evidence box that she finds out that oh, they killed my family. Mm-hmm. This is also where in the other room, what's keeping them distracted while she's doing this is Officer Hooper and the mayor are both talking to a police officer that's on the scene at the house.
Yeah.
And they're disagreeing because the officer's telling her, hold on, wait a minute, we'll send up backup.
Yeah.
And the mayor's like, go in there right now. And he ends up listening to the mayor because he was part of the mob, this officer was, that the mayor led back in the beginning of the movie. He goes inside. He's completely like, oh, yeah, whatever. I have a gun. He has a chainsaw. Until he has to go into the basement.
And then he starts, sweating. He's, sweating. He's scared. And also, he starts seeing all these, terrible things. And then he's like, oh, my God.
He's scared.
I would be like, who wouldn't be?
Yeah, he kind of took on a little more than he could handle.
Yeah, he did. He was real cocky at first.
And the officer and the mayor can all see this because he's kind of FaceTiming them while he's holding the gun and searching around the premises. Mm-hmm. He comes across the room where everybody's body is. Kenny's, Ryan's.
Yeah.
There's a disturbance in the freezer, and he goes to open it, or I don't even know if he goes to open it.
They're like, "What's in that?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know." And so he slowly approaches it. Of course, leave it to a cop to be very reactionary like this.
I think anybody would, but Nikki kind of explodes out of there, frantically screaming, and he freaks out, pulls the trigger, shoots her in the head.
Then R.I.P. Nikki at this point.
R.I.P. Nikki, which this was probably my favorite kill in the movie, just because it is very okay. I've heard people talk about this movie now, and for me, it's it's very off-putting. He kills her because she didn't have to die right here.
She didn't.
She didn't die at the hand of Leatherface or anybody. It was by a cop. It doesn't even have to be a cop. Even if it was anybody, a citizen or whatever.
Yeah.
I could see anybody having this kind of reaction. And then over the phone call, the mayor's like, it's okay. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. Trying to, he's all about covering things up.
Oh yeah, of course he is.
He is. But I thought this was a very, interesting way to put a character out. So actually, I like this. It
was off-putting because then you're like, damn, like she could have survived.
I heard other people talk about it. They thought it was funny. I didn't think it was funny at all.
I didn't think it was funny either. I was like, leave it to a cop.
Yeah.
Because, should be happening. But yeah, and then after this, she goes through this whole evidence box while this whole thing's happening, and she gets mad. Heather gets mad because she finds out all of this about her family. She puts 2 and 2 together, finds out her mom died, and she finds out she was the missing baby.
Yeah.
And I mean, to find out you're adopted is, I'm sure, a heavy thing anyway, because she's gone her whole life not knowing this. And then to find out, too, about, your family has been massacred. But, I mean, there's also that level where it's like, this is a very tough thing to sit on, because you're like, on one hand, the family did a very bad thing.
Yes.
So, I don't know how I'd feel in that moment.
Well, the movie, I'll talk about this more later, but the movie definitely feels like it's trying to have you think of things in a certain light. Mm-hmm. And I think, for me personally, I think it's intriguing. So
it makes me sympathize. It makes me sympathize and empathize with Leatherface a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think that's their intention, and I personally welcome it.
I do too. Because like I said, it adds this different layer to it, and you're like, oh man, I hope he gets justice, because they were complying and they were gonna
I don't
bring
think
him
they were
out.
Gonna comply.
I think they were.
I think maybe but I think this family, they're still bad people at the end of the day. Right. So I'm thinking the way I accept it is I don't think it makes sense, but the movie is trying to make us feel that way. Mm-hmm. And there's something about that dissonance where it doesn't make sense and it's kind of crappy. And I enjoy the crappiness. I enjoy the storytelling really not, fitting necessarily.
Yeah.
But I don't mind it personally. Heather makes it out of the police station. She leaves, writes murderers on the photo of the article back there for the mayor to come across. She goes to a payphone and calls the lawyer. And
she's like, I need to meet you because you've been leaving things out. And then they meet in person at this bar. And he's like, well, didn't you read the letter?
Bro, read the letter.
Read the
letter. That's the one thing.
The one thing he said. The one thing he's like, make sure you read this letter. And she said, no.
I cannot believe she did not read that letter.
Because then she would have found out that her her grandmother was keeping Jed locked in the basement, but she was taking care of him throughout all of these years.
Mm-hmm. Kind of keeping him unknown, but keeping him also from doing any of this stuff.
Right. But also kind of feels a little inhumane, but also kind of endearing in some way.
Well, what's the alternative?
I don't know.
He gets killed. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I wouldn't want him killed, but there needs to be a boundary, because it's also that just feels inhumane to be like, I'm gonna lock you in the basement. I mean, I'm still gonna feed you and shit, but you're kind of imprisoned to the basement. Yeah. So that just doesn't feel good. But it's almost like I said, still kind of a dirty secret that they kind of have that's a theme in the movie.
Yeah, I think she kind of has to, or else there would be fatal repercussions. Obviously you'd want to see him put in some kind of environment to better himself, but I don't think that exists here. I think if anybody realizes that he's alive still, the mayor would get on it and make sure that. But you don't
think there's any environment where he would thrive or better himself at all?
Not in New Texas, no.
Well, I mean, even if he had to go far away and some sort of institution, you don't think that would have bettered him? I don't know. My brain just thinks maybe there could have been some saving there.
Oh, I think that's hopeful. I just don't think it's just he's so family oriented The Sawyers are just generally, that I feel like they'd have to be together. And here in New Texas, they're just not welcomed. You know what I mean?
It's true.
But maybe they should have ended up moving somewhere else. I think the movie definitely tries to make you empathize with his situation.
Which it does, because when I'm like, I want him to get justice, because also in every movie they all speak so poorly of him and they use the R word to describe him, and I'm like, instead of like insulting him, like I just don't know, like maybe if people gave him a chance, maybe he wouldn't have ended up killing people. I don't know.
Right.
It's just terrible.
I agree. I definitely think like he's a product of his environment, and almost in all the movies he doesn't kill because he wants to. It's just like the way he was raised.
It's just I think people just take advantage of his situation, and then it was kind of like reactionary, and then it just became his normal, and that's the only normal he knows.
In that way, this movie does work as a sequel to the original film, because I feel like the original one kind of deep dives into it just briefly and vaguely, and I think this movie is a deep dive into that one particular theme about Leatherface.
Yeah, I agree.
The lawyer tries to buy Heather some time. Heather does escape, but she ends up in Carl's cop car, thinking that, she finds somebody that can, help her out. But Carl turns out to be the son of the mayor.
Son of a mayor.
And he is going to drive her to the slaughterhouse, because that's where the mayor wants to meet with her and him. The lawyer sees them being driven away, goes back to the police station, meets Officer Hooper, and they find out that that's where they're going to be.
Yep.
So they're going to go there as well. And the third group is that when the mayor's telling Carl this is over the intercom, and Leatherface hears this, he knows where the slaughterhouse is, so he's going to go to the slaughterhouse. So now we got 3 different groups of people all going to the slaughterhouse. They decided to tie Heather up. She's changed from her shirt into a button-up.
Like a flannel. And when she was running away in general, like she had like one button and it was like showing her like her stomach anyway.
She decided to only button one of them, I guess, originally.
Yeah, and then like when she's like hung up with her hands, it's so stupid. Like,
it was completely open.
Completely unbuttoned.
You could see her cleavage.
You could see her cleavage. You could see like parts of her boobs, and it's like, okay, this is annoying.
Yeah, it was definitely, to show off her body.
Which, again, nice body.
There is a narrative explanation for this. It's just not the reason, if I'm being honest. But the narrative explanation is that, like you mentioned earlier, there is a plot point with this emblem that she has.
Yes. So there is a reason.
Burned onto her chest.
Yes.
I don't know if that's the primary reason for the story. It is.
I guess that's the only logical thing that we can come up with as to why her shirt would be completely open.
No bra, nothing.
No bra suddenly.
Yeah. But yeah, she's hung up there. Leatherface comes across her. But before he kills her, he sees the emblem. Yeah. And he's like, oh no, your family, starts untying her. Now, they're kind of on the same side now, while Marcus and his goon start beating up Leatherface. Now, this made no sense to me, as in like, these 2 people could not hurt Leatherface. I didn't buy it.
He is a big man. Like, he is a tower of a man. He's big, built, like really tall and wide. And I'm like, that man... No, there's definitely just a plot thing. Like, they just had to get him beat up a little bit. Yeah, of course.
But it didn't make any sense. This, Geraldine, is where we come across my favorite line in the movie.
I fucking hate it.
Because...
I'm so upset.
Because Heather gets away.
I'm really upset with you right now.
She gets the chainsaw, and she looks back at Leatherface. Like, she could escape right here, just like we saw in the beginning, but she decides not to and help out her cousin.
I absolutely hate it.
She grabs the chainsaw.
Please stop.
Throws it back at him and says, do your thing, cuz.
Why?
I love it.
Why?
That was the point in the movie.
I absolutely hated it.
I started cheering. I got up from my seat. I started looking up to see if this movie got nominated for an Oscar, because obviously it deserves it.
I feel like you're being facetious.
I'm a big fan.
Why do you love it so much?
You might know that I'm a big fan of cringe. I love cringy things. And to me, it's endearing.
Do your thing, cuz. Shut the fuck up. I'm sorry.
You didn't like it?
No, it's dumb. I knew this. Okay, but I knew this going into the movie, that she says that at some point. And I was like, so I was expecting it, but not knowing at all when it was happening. And I was like, oh no, I know it's coming.
I started cheering because that was the moment where I realized, like, oh, this is fun. we're like, the movie stops being concerned about being good and quality.
Yeah.
And it starts being fun. And I make the connection. This movie to me is if Scream, it was this is like their Scream Texas Chainsaw movie.
I guess.
Where like all the characters are kind of hot. They're having sex. All the like bits about them are just surface level.
Yeah.
And we say goofy, stupid things like "do your thing, cuz."
Makes sense, right? Makes sense. However, like, if that's the case, then the whole movie is kind of that way. And then it's like, okay, well, at what point do you begin?
You're right. The tone isn't quite set. But
no, it's not. It's a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, you're right.
Which, if that was their intention to kind of do like the cringe thing, they succeeded.
I love to hear at the end.
But like my problem, much like your problem with the Scream series, if Sam is related to Billy Loomis, and she's like, I'm not a killer, and then she's killing people, and she's like enjoying it a little bit.
Yeah.
This woman just found out she's part of the fucking Sawyer family, and then all of a sudden she's like killing people.
Makes no sense.
Makes no sense.
No sense. Especially her in general just sympathizing with Leatherface when he just killed all your friends.
And especially, the most cringe part to me, also aside from the do your thing, cuz was when she's in the cop car and she's like, so, you're a Hartman? Well, I'm a Sawyer. You just found out.
She did just find out. And the scene, so she's like badass right now.
Yes.
And the scene immediately after her is like her yelping, like, no, stop, because Carl's dragging her out of the car.
So angsty. I hate it.
I love it. I'm a big fan. Like, I love it's just fun to me. You know, like you said, not taking yourself too seriously.
Yes, it's not. But I guess I like a good serious horror movie, but I love a good. If that's what you're gonna do, then set that tone.
You're right.
Through the whole thing, because then I'm thrown for a fucking loop.
It's not consistent.
Because then I'm like thinking, oh, this is a serious horror movie. Okay, love it. And then you're like throwing in these random things, and they're so cringe, and I'm like, oh, what are we doing here? Like, is this just bad writing?
Yes.
Yes and no, I guess. But it's like, was the whole point of this to be kind of a bad, fun Texas Chainsaw movie?
No, because it didn't know you're right. It didn't know what it wanted to be.
Yeah.
Like, it spent the first half trying to be fun and interesting, and then the very ending, it was like just camp all over the place.
So that's my biggest gripe with it, is like not knowing what it wanted to be.
Enough.
Because like, if that was the intention the whole time, then make that clear in the writing and make it camp the whole time. But it wasn't.
No, because they didn't know.
Because like, obviously watching the old ones, part 2, part 3,
campy.
Campy, so campy, and you could tell through the whole thing
From the
they
beginning.
were not trying to be fun.
But this one, they weren't quite sure.
Yeah, they weren't.
Yeah. No, I do think that's a fair complaint, and I think you're right about that. Once Leatherface does get a hold of the chainsaw again, he, is able to take care of the mayor.
Oh yeah, he gets him in the Achilles heels first.
Yeah, he gets him in the ankles, and he starts backing off bit by bit. Officer Hooper shows up with a gun, and the mayor's pleading with him to shoot Leatherface. He seems like he doesn't know what to do, to shoot Leatherface or not. Ultimately, he decides not to shoot anybody, and Leatherface pushes him into like what looks like a meat grinder.
Yeah.
And he's holding off to the ledge so he doesn't fall into the grinder.
This part was fun.
And then Leatherface chops his hands off with the chainsaw.
Yeah.
And he starts falling slowly into the meat grinder.
And then he just kind of kicks his hands off.
Yeah.
And then the cop just stands there, lets it happen, and then he says, "Clean this shit up."
Yeah. So and he says the same thing that the mayor told him at the beginning of the movie.
Yes. Something like answering to the good book or
Yeah.
something. And I'm like, ain't that funny though when people like say stuff like that? Because obviously the good book implies the Bible. And those people are very morally, well, not those people, because I don't want to make the assumption that all of those people are that way. But typically, a vast majority of the people
Evangelicals.
Yes.
That's something interesting that I've learned a lot living here in the South, because I'm Catholic. Mm-hmm. And our perception of the Bible is really different from like what I've found here. Like Baptists, like Jesus is your friend.
Yeah.
But oftentimes we Catholics view Jesus as cruel. And God is cruel, and we live, sufferment in life. You know what I mean? And that leads to a lot of shame in a lot of Catholics, and whatever. But I have learned that is interesting, that like we have a different perception of like practically the same religion, perceived in different ways. But yeah, that does happen often.
It's wild.
Yeah. The officer kind of lets him go.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing to do. They walk back to the house, the mansion. She tries to kind of like clean his face up a little. He doesn't seem to like it very much, and he goes off back into his little room in the basement.
Yeah, and then she goes down there, picks up the tray, locks him up. So then that implies that she's gonna stay there and
live this life,
do her thing.
Yeah, she's a Sawyer.
She's a Sawyer.
That's right.
God, it was so bad.
She finally reads the letter, and that's what it says. It's like, hey, there's this guy down there. Take care of him. You're a Sawyer.
She's like, you can't sell the house, basically. Like,
yeah.
He kind of comes with it, essentially. But that's Texas Chainsaw. 3D.
Yeah. Okay, Geraldine, we just had this discussion about this movie.
Yeah.
After the discussion, we usually rank these things.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm excited to talk about it. I don't have any more thoughts to lay it out about the film, just that generally I enjoyed the movie.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of fun. If there was any of these movies that we've seen so far, this is the one I'd probably come back to the most. Just because
really,
it's just the most accessible one. Like the other ones, like I think the remakes, like the 2003 remake and the beginning, the prequel to it, are very scary.
Yeah.
I think the original is scary. I think the sequels to the original are very campy. I wouldn't watch any of those ever again. But this one has a little bit of fun to it, and it makes it easier for me to watch.
Makes sense, given that you don't really like horror films. As somebody who likes horror films, I would not want to revisit this one. I would revisit 2003 in the beginning a lot more than I would the other ones.
Yeah.
Just because that serious fear, I'm like, ugh.
Yeah. That being said, this is the one I'd revisit the most often, it's not my favorite.
Yeah.
My current ranking stands from best to worst. The Beginning, the original 1974, 2003 remake, Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw 3, Part 2, and in last place, The Next Generation. This movie, for me, is going to take the number 3 slot. I love the Beginning. I think is still the best quality made movie. The original still holds up very much. So now we approach the 2003 remake, right?
Blasphemy.
I think that movie's fine, but I think The Beginning is a much better version of that movie.
Okay.
And I think this movie is, I'd rather hang out with Heather than Kemper, than these other characters that we have, than Morgan. And because of that, I prefer this movie.
Okay, interesting. My current ranking stands best to worst, 1974. In second place, The Beginning. In third place, the 2003 remake. In fourth place, Part 3. In fifth place, Next Generation. And in sixth place, Part 2. This is tough. There's just so much that they did okay. They did pretty well with. And then there's so much that they didn't do well with. Like again, the random, like the weird shootout. That's just, what the fuck? It just didn't make sense. The timeline doesn't add up. We've talked about that. The inconsistencies there. Mm-hmm. I don't know. The weird survival of the grandmother, who supposedly, I guess, just happened to not be there during this weird shootout. We don't get to know the characters. There's no connection to their deaths, so it doesn't really mean anything to me when they do die. I'm like, okay, on to the next. Let's go. Suddenly, Heather's all about her Sawyer bloodline. Like, those are just things that I'm like, this is really icky to me.
Okay.
The things I do like, Leatherface is cool. He did pretty well. They did really well with the mask. I thought that was a really interesting thing to see him actually sewing a mask into his actual face.
That was so cool.
That was very cool.
He gets all the spotlight in this one.
Yeah, he does. There's like this level of sadness that they bring to it as well, with him being alone. So, I mean, and he's also like out for revenge, and you kind of are rooting for him.
Yeah.
Which is a really fun. I love that kind of like storyline when they make you root for the bad person.
Me too.
Because that's another reason why I'm so into the TV show You on Netflix. Even though you know he's never gonna stop killing people, you still root for him to stop killing people.
Right.
You still root for him to change his life. And he never does.
It's fascinating.
It is fascinating because you're like,
endearing.
You can't stop watching it.
Yep.
And I love this theme of family, obviously. Like, even though, you know, like they mention it in the movie, the lawyer does. He's like, well, I guess, you know, she took care of him because it's family.
Right. To talk about that for a second, I feel like all these movies I've been wanting to do that the whole time.
Yeah.
Family, family, family. I feel like this is the only one that has really nailed it into a way that it connects with me.
Yeah. So for me, I think the things that I didn't like actually outweighed the things that I did like. So I feel like I would probably put it after the third place. So for me, it's going to go fourth place, which would make it, for me, my ranking, 1974, The Beginning, the 2003 remake, this one, the Texas Chainsaw 3D, Part 3, Next Generation, and then end with Part 2.
Okay. So we're not too far off. It's my number 3, and it's your number 4.
Mm-hmm. Wild. Because I didn't think I would rank it that high. But, I mean, it's just better quality than the other films, unfortunately. I do love, like 80s films and 90s films and stuff, but they just don't serve as much as that, because the stories were just really like, what the fuck?
They get a little wacky.
They get way too wacky. They get really out there. So to me, it was not very much about like Leatherface, and I want more Leatherface.
And this one was?
This one was. And, all right. Yeah.
All right, guys. So we're excited to get on with the rest of the series. We don't have that many movies left.
We have 2 left.
You just have 2 left, and then we'll conclude our 3rd season.
It'll take a little bit of a break. We'll throw some off-season episodes at you, and then are we revealing our 4th season at the end of this season, or?
Well, yeah, let's wait until we get towards the end.
Then we've already got our 4th season planned, so beware. Question mark? I don't know.
Follow us on socials at Fright Flight Pod.
At Fright Flight Pod.
Send us an email.
Yeah. frightflightpod@gmail.com.
Yeah. And yeah, everybody, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Fright or Flight, a Live Oaks Village production. This episode was hosted by Geraldine Johnson and Saul Alberto Arizmendi Ochoa. Editing and music composition by Saul Alberto Arizmendi Ochoa.